NERDSoul.
X-Men, okay. And then you produced She Makes Comics, which was very sort of a transformative documentary for me to watch. And this, how did this happen, dude?
Well, having done the other movies, the movie on Grant Morrison and Warren Ellis and stuff, it was kind of a logical thing to be like, oh, well, let's do something on Neil Gaiman. So I just sent him an email, and it took a little while because he has a very busy schedule.
Yeah.
To see the movie. But he was like, I want to do it, now's not a great time. That was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe now. I just kind of kept checking back in with him, and then when he was doing this tour that a lot of the movie is about, I was like, oh, I think this would be a cool angle to, follow you on this tour and then mix it with your life. So that's kind of how he was like, all right, that sounds good.
So you went on the road with him?
Yeah, we went on the road for about a month at Comic-Con, followed around Comic-Con, some spots in the U.S. and then all through the UK, so the whole UK.
That's great, man. It costs money.
Yeah, it was, if only now that the British pound has collapsed, now would have been the time to do it. It was more expensive back then. But it was,
but he's not touring now, so.
No, we couldn't do it. But yeah, I mean, it cost money, but we did it pretty cheap, and just kind of, driving around England through the whole, from the bottom to the top.
Anybody who's seen the movie want to ask you questions?
Were there any restrictions on the access that he gave you to him? Were there times where he was just like, I don't want to see you guys?
No, not during the time we were on the tour, which was the main time we filmed. So no, he was pretty much. I think we were there so much it just kind of he either kind of forgot we were there or just got used to it and was kind of would talk to us and stuff. So no, he didn't say that. I mean, there was some. Obviously, we couldn't film him all the time at his house or whatever, but on the road and for the bulk of the time we were shooting it, now we could just go. We always had it mic'd, so there was some stuff where he would don't use that because he was talking to his agent backstage at Comic-Con or something about a film deal.
Sure.
So he was like, "Don't put that in." But
you say mean things about other people and stuff?
No, it's more like oh, this contract is going through for this thing or whatever. So.
Anybody else? Yes.
Yep.
What was your favorite moment with him?
I think the best of these events that we did was when, probably my favorite was when we shot him and Grant Morrison. I thought it was the coolest just because, they're two legends and they get to see them kind of bounce off each other. It was a lot of fun. The event we did at that church, I think, was sort of the best event of this whole thing because it was this crazy, it was 900 years old church. And there was a ton of people, and it was just a really good vibe. It was crazy to be in something that old, that building, super old.
Has he given you any personal feedback about the movie? You know if you've seen it, or?
Yeah. Well, we sent it to him, and he watched it. He liked it a lot. He was like, "It's all good." The only thing he said was, "There's a moment where he's talking about Terry Pratchett, and Terry Pratchett's making a joke, and then there's a title that's Terry Pratchett passed away." And he was like, "Give it a moment so that you can have the laugh, and then read the title." So that was the only note he had.
So you did that?
Yeah, I did that. I was like, "Yes, that's exactly nuts." So, because he was like, "Oh, I was laughing," and then this title came up, so I was like, give it a beat. So
you learned something.
Yep.
Yeah, probably learned a lot.
Oh yeah. Well, I think he's got an interesting perspective because the things I was kind of most interested to hear about from him in doing the movie, I was trying not to just kind of be like, oh, Neverwhere is about this. It was always the angle with all the works was to try to have it illuminate something about his approach to fiction. So a lot of the stuff we talked about was kind of early in his career and kind of when he was hustling. So I think that was interesting to hear about because it's probably more relatable than being like, oh, it's so hard to sell another 1 million books or selling this. But it's relatable, I think, to hear oh, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, and I was writing for Penthouse and stuff, just trying to pay the bills.
Who else would you like to maybe do one of these on? Anybody on your list?
At this point, I think I've done so many of the people in comics, it's hard to come up with anybody else. I think it would be cool to do some kind of like shorter pieces about different topics. So like one thing I would love to do if there was like do like a 40-minute thing, do like a 40 minutes on Miracle Man, which we didn't include it here. I think it's one of Neil's best, and it's such a like convoluted and interesting story of why it was unavailable for so long. There's so many legal issues and stuff, so I think it would be pretty interesting. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to say. I mean, really, like Grant, Warren, Neil. I think it's not just that they're good writers. I think they are interesting people, and they all have kind of like a persona or like a mythos around them. Yeah. So I think it's interesting if you just are somebody who there's plenty of writers out there who are good writers and write interesting books, but you don't really feel like you want to know that much about them. It's just kind of like, all right, there's the guy. So I think it's interesting that people are bigger in some way.
Now that you've done a few of these, they've all been pretty cool. Do you feel like you're more comfortable with your process now? And was this one any easier to make, or are they all just kind of difficult in their own way?
In some ways, this one was hard because we shot so much more stuff because it was all this kind of on the road thing. So it's easier if you're interviewing somebody, especially having made a few. I can kind of be like, all right, this is the stuff that's actually going to be in a movie. And like when I first did Grant, I asked him about like all of his works and all this stuff, and I was like, oh well, it's interesting to hear about like the nitty gritty of Final Crisis, but it's not really something that necessarily fits in his life story. So now I kind of figured out like what you really want to get is like where the person's personal life or emotions or sort of like philosophy on the world come through in the work more than like the work itself. But in this case, it was kind of hard because we had so much of this on the road stuff, and it was the big question was kind of like, how do you make it feel interesting without kind of being repetitive? Of like he's going to another place, he's signing more books. How do you keep like a sense of forward momentum and then balance it? So this one, it was a lot trickier, I think, than like the She Makes Comics or the Image to figure out that balance, and it went through a lot of different drafts and kind of approaches. But I think I'm like able to know much faster now, like just delete this because it's not going to survive, So you kind of like realize like this is going to survive to the end.
So you know what's like you're sculpting as you go. Right?
Yeah. So it's just like that's. I think the whole process is you have like 50 hours, 60 hours of material, and it's all about just taking away what doesn't contribute to the story and leaving what does, and then figuring out how to order that. Because you could make this movie any number of ways. You could have originally there was a whole part before where he goes to Comic-Con that was sort of like a 10-minute section, and it just felt like it's hard to start a movie at somewhere so big, and then it's kind of like I didn't want to jumble the chronology too much to make it not true to the actual experience. So
how long have you been editing?
For me personally, I learned editing for this movie or in general. Well, the bulk of it was shot. All that tour stuff was shot in 2013. So there was a cut of it. Then I kind of I was working on the other movies, the Image movie and She Makes Comics, sort of on and off with this one. So it was in editing for like 3 years, and then it all really came together. Basically, kind of figured out the structure, and then did one final sit down with Neil to sort of fill in all the gaps, and that's where I think it all kind of came together because we got to ask him a lot about kind of his process and his younger years and his struggles, and that I think really contributed to understanding him.
Did you interview his kids, or were they off limits, or?
Well, we interviewed one of his daughters briefly, but it didn't really fit. I would have loved to talk to his mom, who you could see in there briefly, but we were going to talk to her, but he was like, oh, she's too tired, she went home, so there's no luck there. I think it's, I think it would be an interesting perspective. The stuff his daughter said was pretty interesting, but it's kind of, who knows, maybe that would have been better, but we didn't get anything that fit super well in there.
Were there any other people that you wanted to get as interviews, like Dave McKean? Or
Yeah, I would love to do Dave McKean, but the scheduling never worked out. We really wanted to get Alan Moore, but he was like, I've done enough interviews, I don't want to do any more interviews. So I was like, all right. But I think other than that, we got most of the people we wanted to. But yeah, I mean, it was annoying not to have Dave McKean because I think they're so associated. But it didn't. You can't make what happens. You can't make it up out of thin air.
Dave McKean documentary now.
I feel like somebody must have done that, but yeah, it would be interesting.
Anything else that you're editing right now? Like while you worked on this, you were.
Well, yeah, I'm almost done with a narrative movie, like a fiction movie called Trip House, which we shot a day of at the Culver City Comic Club last year, and has Jen Wenger in it, who was here for the Wonder Woman event you guys did. And a lot of like Amber Benson, who was in Buffy, Chloe Dykstra, Tiffany Smith, who hosts all the DC's video stuff online. So a lot of people from kind of the world of comic books and such are in that. And that's we got into our first festival, which is going to be in October, but hopefully it'll be out early next year, mid next year.
We'll do a screening here. So
yeah,
I'm excited to see that.
So yeah, it's a pretty. It's definitely inspired by like Neil and Grant. It's called Trip House. So you can imagine it's pretty.
And it's gonna start at 7 p.m. Whatever.
Whenever it happens.
Yeah, whenever it happens.
But yeah, so that's almost done, and then I'm also just about done with a longer version of the Chris Claremont documentary that we did a while ago. And that's gonna come out. I think it's going basically straight to Netflix, and it'll be on in like probably July of next year, so it'll be a while. But so if you saw that one, it was it was like 45 minutes, so now it's about 75 minutes, and it's got some more stuff in there.
It's awesome. Anybody else? Yes.
I'll keep asking questions.
Come on, man. Keep it going. I'll sit down.
So, do you get like outside funding? Do you fund these yourselves? How do you approach?
In some cases, some of the previous movies we did Kickstarter for, like She Makes Comics, we had a very successful Kickstarter. With this movie, it was just done kind of on spec, and we wound up selling the movie basically when we were nearing the end to Vimeo. So Vimeo licensed it to basically put it on their on-demand platform exclusively. So that worked out great because it got the funding. So that was part of why it took a long time in the editing, because I was kind of like, well, I don't want to, I want to have some money to actually finish the thing. So then we eventually made that deal, and that worked out. So yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, Kickstarter, I know you're not a fan.
It's okay. You got it done, so that's good.
Well, I didn't kickstart this, which I think was like, I was very happy not to just Kickstarter. It's a terrible experience running a Kickstarter, I think.
Yeah, how come?
It's very stressful. You never know. I mean, even like She Makes Comics was a big success, but there were times where it was kind of like, wow, is this going to make it? Like, and that was sort of a best case scenario. So it's very stressful and very it's very nervous, and it's hard. It's kind of out of your hands to some degree, So I think
you're not a fan either.
I think it's had its heyday. I think it's like past. I think there was a time when people were really into it because it was a rare thing. And I remember like when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, this is super cool. Like you really get to make a project happen that wouldn't. And I think it became more of like a pre-order system.
Right. Yeah.
So you weren't getting the kind of like higher donations unless you're a celebrity. So like if you do like Veronica Mars, it's easy because you're like call with Kristen Bell, $2,000. People pay for that, but it's harder if you don't have access to really a celebrity or sort of something like that to raise a bunch of money. I mean, I think there's still projects that it's viable for, and there's still projects that I support on there, but I think that it's like on the down slope in terms of
I think
for film is very hard.
Yeah.
It's still huge with comics, and there's certain kind of products.
Yeah.
Technical products or games. Games are real huge there. But our film is super hard.
I think it's really a pre-order system for those things.
Yeah, we're doing a panel about that at Long Beach Saturday at 10:30 on the Facebooks.
Yeah, on Facebook. So yeah, I think it's like it's cool to get to support people directly, but it's kind of like, I think a lot of times you wind up just hitting up your friends or you hitting up your family or whatever, especially if you're doing something that doesn't have a built-in audience. So, you know, a lot of these comics, it's like they'll get $3,000 to do an issue, but maybe that $1,000 that came from, you know, the person's mom or something. Who knows?
You just make it. That's all you get.
Yeah. In this case, yeah, it worked out. And it's like, I would prefer, I'm trying to do now basically a series version of things similar to this, or movies about kind of the world of comics and fandom, and basically get it funded as a series so that it's less to worry about. Because it is very stressful to be making something and not know and putting, you know, money down and kind of like having to go on spec when you're not a vocal person. So.
It's good. I'm glad that there's somebody out there documenting though, like, you know, while Neil and Grant and all these guys are around and talking and.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Jack Kirby, I can't really. There's not much video of Jack Kirby, or, you know, and it's cool to get people when they're in kind of their heyday and not just, you know, really old or something.
While they have their memories, yes.
Yeah. Neil had a great memory. I'll say that. I think that's part of why his writing is so effective, is because he can really like remember what it was like to be, you know, 10, or remember what it was like to be a teenager or something. So I think that makes
it. So you can tap into it when he writes.
Yeah, I think like, you know, if you read like Ocean at the End of the Lane, it really feels like, you know, a documentary of his life at that time, and it's, you know, I don't remember being 7 half that well, and I'm, you know, half his age, so it's a useful thing for him, I think, and it's good for interviewing.
Any last questions, Daniel? Another question?
What did you shoot this on?
This was shot on the FS100, the Sony camera. That's shot. I think it's a great camera. I mean, it's very.
Great.
Most of the time when we were shooting him, we had him. He had a mic on, so he would kind of be wandering around. So it was good to be very portable and very unobtrusive. So I think that's key at Doc, is you don't want to make it like all about you. You want it to be more that stuff is happening. Just you're sniping this stuff.
Yeah. And did you get anything signed on the tour?
No, I felt bad because after seeing him signing all this stuff, I have a book at home signed for. I went to one of his signings like maybe 15 years ago or something, so I have some. Got one in the can.
You don't want to blur the lines.
No, you got to keep it. I was always kind of like, well. No.
Question? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think because with the comic book movies and everything's becoming more mainstream, that you're seeing more of an interest in projects like this?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think when there's two things. That's one of them, and I think there's a whole. It's been when we released Grant Morrison, it was 2010, and sort of DVD, the heyday of like the Best Buy DVD section was kind of ending, but there wasn't really anything to replace it yet. So now, with places like Amazon or Netflix or Hulu, there's really like a viable place. There's just so much content. People just want so much stuff and it's much more specialized because there's so many outlets. So it's a lot easier to get, you know, funding and to get placement for stuff like this that just didn't exist before, you know, even 5 years ago. So it's been, I think it's frustrating a little bit because I think people are reluctant to pay for stuff. Like, I think a lot of people ask me, like, oh, when's it going to Netflix? And it's like, oh, you know, it's great to watch stuff on Netflix, but it's not. With Netflix, you get one payment, so it doesn't matter how many people watch it. If one person watched it, 1 billion people watched it, you get the same amount of money.
Wow, that's it.
And they're very secretive, so it's kind of like, you know, and also once it's on Netflix, nobody will buy it on demand. So that's the downside. The upside is it's a lot easier to get people to watch it. So with Grant Morrison, it was mainly DVD and some kind of direct download. But now it's just, the stuff is more accessible, and I think there's a reality show about a comic book store. It's just so much huge in the culture. Yeah, it's just like a gigantic thing in the culture. I think it's just completely different than it was 5 years ago. Well, I mean, so I think it's going to go down a little bit, but I don't think there'll be like a gigantic crash like that was in the 90s.
It's level.
Yeah, I think some Comic Cons are going to not survive, but it seems like people just enjoy it. Dressing up or seeing people. since we're coming out with the longer version, disc at $5 only, you can check out the Chris Claremont. This is Chris Claremont. X-Men.
I saw it. It's great.
We got these shirts from She Makes Comics, the movie we did a while ago, and we got DVDs of